All right, screen's recording, board is recording, and I'm just going to run in with a little bit of an intro. You guys cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, what's up, everybody? JB here from Tell Me You're Joking. When I started this show, I said right out of the gate, the intent was to smash up pop politico taboo topics here in the Midwest. Anything from KDHX shutting down to getting in the weeds of policy and politics. And today is kind of like my perfect iteration of what I thought I wanted to do. You've already read your dashboard. You've seen the names. You might be thinking to yourself, those sound familiar. Well, yes, they are familiar names. Either you know them from what they do, which kudos to these guys because they're getting their names out there, or you are a sad follower of Tell Me You're Joking. And you're like, oh, they're previous guests. Well, the latter is true. Joining me today from the right and the left to I'm going to call them friends of mine that are representing their constituents in the Missouri House from down south on the, I'm not even going to say on the right. I'm going to call him a libertarian and he can shake his head yes or no. From down south on the right, Mr. Brian Wolfen. What's up, Brian? How you doing?
Hey, JB, thanks for having me again. Yeah, I mean, look, political ideology-wise, it just depends on the day. I think I'm the most consistent person here, or one of the most consistent people here, and I don't know where that necessarily puts me. I've always called myself a constitutional conservative, but the direction of where this political spectrum has went, I don't know.
Is it safe to say that you're not a Democrat?
I'm definitely not a Democrat. I will say that for sure.
All right, so let's start there, and then on the left, and he strikes me more of a right of left of center, a little left of center. I don't know. He's from the South Side. He's got sheet metal in his blood. He's got 5-0 in his blood. From the city of St. Louis, Mr. Nick Kimball. What's up?
Hey, JB, what's going on? Yeah, I think that is an apt description. I would say I'm a pragmatist. I will give Brian a compliment. He is easily the most consistent in terms of ideology out there. He's got his Missouri Constitution, his pocket Constitution on the floor. Sometimes that means he's voting no on similar bills to the Democratic side for different reasons, and he does a great job of stating those on the floor. But yeah, from South City, proud to be from there, and happy to be on with you all.
Well, gentlemen, there is no shortage of subject matter in the world today, and zooming in on our backyard here at the state of Missouri is no different. There is session is back in. You guys are down in Jeff City, getting to work, attempting to run the state. Let's call it what it is. And the last few years, I would say really, I'll say it, since Trump 1.0, there seems to be just an explosion of interest of elevated items that the general public is becoming more and more aware of, as far as what is going on in Jeff City. What are the bills? What are the amendments? And a lot of it is due to the ballot initiatives that we've seen that have created quite a commotion across the board. But here we are in 2026, and now we're talking about what we're going to lead off today. It's kind of like what I consider the king of the hill subject matter, and that is state income tax. And I'm just going to kind of give a little bit of my own perception from I'm more middle. I'm middle left. I'm a Scott Galloway, right? I'm right of left of center. I'm claiming that back. When I think of state income tax, the national narrative is really, really simple. This is a talking point across the country, and everybody's going to compare and contrast states like California and Illinois and New York that have very high income taxes, state income tax levels, compared to Texas and Florida and Tennessee, which are at zero, or for all intent and purposes, zero, right? And so those on the right want to be more like Texas. Those on the left don't necessarily want to be more like California. They just want to be able to pay their bills, in my opinion. That's a little bit different. But Missouri is attempting to go down that path. So I thought it would be good to have you guys on, get a little bit of compare and contrast of perspectives more than anything. And given that the pocket constitutionalist is, clearly does a lot of reading and is on the side of the team that is rolling out this proposal, Bryant, would you mind taking a second and talking a little bit about the 10,000-foot view of what is Missouri really talking about from a bill perspective when it comes to simplistically stating eliminating the state income tax?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's any simple way to put it. The way that this building works is quite odd when it comes to the legislative process, because I would say what we've seen thus far, which is the Speaker of the House ran a House Joint Resolution that's will go to the vote of the people, that it basically says that we're scrapping some of the Hancock Amendment. It's going to give the General Assembly the authority to raise sales tax or service taxes on the people of Missouri. And obviously that is to basically try to replenish lost general revenue as we would be reducing the income tax. And they had a hearing on it. It was quite contentious. I wasn't in that committee, but the reason I even bring that up is because honestly, the House committee sub that might get brought to that committee on a vote could look totally different. So, Nick's on budget. He may know a little bit more than myself, but from what I'm gathering, it is very possible that the income tax deduction or abolishment that we end up with in the end voting on may not look anything like we've seen publicly so far.
Okay.
And that's what we play these shell games here. And
Well,
it's one of the big problems that we have with transparency.
That's as you were describing a little bit of the process that is going on right now, basically talking about in committee that they are talking about trying to figure out a way to legally allow the state to alter sales tax, service taxes, etc. It sounds as if, to me, simplistically, that's a robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of ideology there. Nick,
well, can I just interject real quick, JB? And my apologies, but I completely agree. As someone, my political ideology, I think income tax is theft. I think people work for their money, and then when the government comes in and says, "Hey, we got to take anywhere from 5 to 30% of that to pay for services," I think that's wrong. And when I hear the governor speak about trying to get rid of or abolish income tax, I was all gung ho. I was like, absolutely, I love to hear it. But I guess I shouldn't have been surprised that it wasn't going to be that simple, because of course, as you said, we're just going to rob Peter to pay Paul in the end. But anyways.
So I see our friend from South City grinning a little bit, and I'm sure there's a lot to unpack there. But I said that this is not a formal debate style conversation, but the floor is yours, Nick. You get 2 minutes. Let's hear the rebuttal.
Yeah.
How are you viewing this rollout again from the cheap seats?
Yeah, so I think it's an apt description. I'm the ranking minority member on the Commerce Committee, along with my role on budget. But ranking minority member, low man on the totem pole in the super minority, but the head of that totem pole, so to speak. So this bill HJR did come through the Commerce Committee. So it was like a 4.5-hour hearing. It was contentious. I will say. As a Democrat in the building, in the super minority, I don't know if I've ever felt so empowered, powerful, whatever word you want to use, because there was a lot of witnesses and there was a lot of Democratic rebuttal to questions, concerns about the bill, this rollout, and there wasn't a whole lot of pushback on the Republican side. And I think that is in big part to what Bryant spoke to, because we are robbing Peter to pay Paul. This is not a cut and dried, we're eliminating the income tax. And I agree with most of what he said in describing the bill. The only pushback I would give is the actual ballot language for this HJR doesn't quite explain the robbing Peter to pay Paul part. It just says, hey, do you want to lower your income tax? And then, you got to read the rest of the bill to figure out, well, of course I want to lower my income tax. Everyone's going to get behind that, Republican, Democrat, Independent, in between. But when you read that, my sales taxes are going to expand and go up drastically, well, that's a different story. It's kind of a bait and switch. But I do think and the last point here, that to how you frame the question of, we are the rationale for this bill is, hey, look what Texas, Tennessee, Florida, some of these other states have done. And how it gets into the national narrative is, oh, California, New York, super high taxes. Texas, Florida, Tennessee, not so much. Those states are growing at an exponential rate. I would argue that's for some other things, which I would mostly attribute to, to oversimplify, like a yes in my backyard mentality versus a NIMBY no in my backyard, where you have a bunch of bureaucracy, which I think Brian and I probably both agree on. We need to make building easier. We need to make, more housing so folks can move. And I think that's why a lot of folks are seeing the move into some of those states as opposed to higher tax states like California, New York, because everything's a trade-off, right? It's just a matter of what your ideology is. There are less services in terms of when you get lower on the income spectrum, and there are trade-offs. The California, New York, whether it be transit, Medicaid, Medicare, services for the working class and lower and working poor. So I would attribute it more to a regulation versus deregulation situation. But for the most part, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
So let me throw this out here first. And Brian, I'm going to throw this to you because to me this seems like Econ 101, whether we use an average everyday household as the example, or a small business like yours. You're a small business owner, right? And where I'm going with this is, for either institution, that being a home or a business, we go into the scenario or the world, and we have expenses. We have things we know we have to pay for, whether it's mortgage or groceries or tuition or healthcare or whatever it is, right? And we have a nut to cover. And then we look at our revenue and we look at, what can we afford, et cetera. This is just basic home econ, right? The state of Missouri, simplistically put, is no different. We have things in this state, be it roads, infrastructure, education, teachers, first responders, on and on and on. These things, no matter who wins this fight, those things don't go away. My question to you is, do you see on the Republican side of the aisle, have you seen a concerted effort to actually pay attention to what our budget is and how we are going to pay for those things through the lens of this discussion? Because I'm in the weeds. I'm a nerd. I read this news. I don't see that. I don't see that being sold and told to the public. What are you seeing?
So, it's not going to, the plan that I've heard so far, not necessarily. But the reality is to kind of hit back on what we just said about we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I don't think there's any thought process on losing income, because I think in the end, the state's going to end up getting more income as we increase sales tax or service taxes on things. So, and that's why under its current form, I'm going to really struggle to support what has been handed to us thus far. Because at the end, I think Missourians, and not just Missourians, you're going to have tourists as well that are going to be paying, a lot of this. But the state in the end is going to be getting and generating more revenue than what we were under the income tax, just per how I see it. Now, Nick is on budget. He might be able to I don't know if you guys have had those discussions. I doubt it thus far, because you guys are so thick in the weeds on fiscal year 2027. But, reality is, this building doesn't have a revenue problem, and I'm going to go to the classic, conservative saying, we have the spending problem, and or I can name several.
But let me challenge that just a little bit, because the perception is reality, and when we think about, you say that we don't have a revenue problem, that we have a spending problem, but if you poll the average Joe and Jane across the state of Missouri, and you just ask them super simple questions as to whether or not their services are adequate or above average. That being, are your roads good? Are your intersections good? Do you feel like your schools are up to date? Do you feel like that your children are getting out of their public education what you expect from them? Infrastructure, are first responders paid enough? Some of these really simple questions in this state, This is one of those 80-20 issues, right? We hear 80-20 across the country when it comes to voter ID or certain things, right? In the state of Missouri, if you ask those questions, that's an 80-20 no to yes. How do you respond to that when you lead with, we have plenty of revenue, we have a spending issue, but it feels as if the spending is not actually benefiting the population?
Well, I mean, that may be the case. I think that's at hand overall, just what government efficiency is. We here at the state level, you're right. I mean, we may not have the best services in the world, and I don't disagree with that. I don't think they're horrible per se, at least from what I utilize out of state services. But I think generally when you look at us nationwide, we may not be in the upper echelon. But I don't know if we prioritize our spending the way that we should. We can go into the governor's recommended cuts on like disability services. That has been kind of it hasn't really made the headlines a whole lot, but there's been a real big grassroots efforts to really push back on the governor's recommended cuts in that department. And when I even seen that was even a recommended cut, I was quite frankly surprised, because the amount of money that we're going to be spending putting towards Kansas City for the World Cup, or the amount of money that we put into like tourism or just many like sports facilities and things along those lines. And then here we're cutting essential services. It kind of shocked me, to be honest. So I don't know if our priorities in the right place.
Nick, I want to take what he just said, and I want to tie it to a previous comment as well. And I want to get your take on, the compare and contrast, because we referenced states like Texas and Florida, in particular, even Tennessee, that are states that are famous for having no income tax, that they basically generate the vast majority of the revenue from sales and service taxes. You kind of alluded to it. The one thing that is massively different between Missouri and those three states is, number one, we don't have oil. Number two, we're not Florida with multi-millions of tourists a year that are going to Orlando or any one of the beaches. And we don't have a Broadway, Nashville kind of environment that is thriving the way Nashville is. And so what is the sale? Like, if you had to support it, where would you start in order to try and generate this sales tax from a tourism or a service standpoint? Or how do you view it, really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is the way to do it. Sales taxes are, if you spend more than you save, which is 85% of people in the country, but let's say Missouri, for example, like, you're going to be paying more in taxes. If you're a senior who is already, you're retired, there's no tax cut portion of this. This is just your taxes are going up. I think there's, my side of the aisle, one of our representatives introduced an income tax bill kind of in opposition, in response to this, that would restore the income tax to what it was a few years ago. That essentially says, hey, the more you make, the more you have to pay in taxes. It's progressive tax, and I know progressives kind of, some people like that word, some people don't. But if you look back to try to combine a few points in here, people, I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle talk about, hey, in the 1960s, the 1970s, like post World War II, Pax Americana, the Kennedys, Camelot, when people were happy, there was government investments. Some people on both sides will push back on that and say, well, we had a less equal society, and all that is true. But when it comes to tax policy in this discussion, corporations were taxed at a fair level. High earners were taxed at a fair level. Companies had to pay pensions. There was a lot of support to lift all boats. A rising tide lifts all ships, and there was investment in this country. And I think people are getting caught up. And I think I'll go a little conspiracy theory on you to switch sides up. Like, the corporate overlords are trying to turn us against each other on some of these culture issues, because they don't want us to focus on we've slashed taxes for us, for our people, for the super uber wealthy. I think there's a report that like I don't know, there's like 900 billionaires or something in the country. I just read a newspaper article about it. 900, and they own more wealth than like the entire GDP of the United States and China combined. Like they're trying to shield us from that. So one, that's where I would start if we were going to talk about how do we actually improve services, and make this state competitive, make this country competitive. But to your point on the Texas, Tennessee, and Florida, I like going to the Lake of the Ozarks as much as the next guy. Soulard's a great place in St. Louis. Kansas City has some other, Power and Light. All those are fun, but that's not Florida, Tennessee, Texas. You're right. They have oil tax. They have corporation tax and franchise tax, which we've already eliminated. The past decade, the supermajority has spent eliminating the income tax. The original argument for stair-stepping the income tax was we're going to have businesses flood, we're going to have rich folks fund, and they're going to spend more, invest in Missouri, and people are going to come here because of that investment. We've not seen that happen. That was the same argument for eliminating the capital gains tax last year. We have not seen that happen. And as Brian stated, when we have less taxes, we're in a difficult budget situation because of federal spending has decreased. ARPA's run out. The Trump administration obviously has different priorities. That's all true. But our first things we're cutting are disability services. We're trying to kick folks out of their home from being with their families, make the state actually pay more money to put them in institutions, and cut, the people who take care of the severely disabled. They have 2 or 3 jobs. They're barely scraping by. So that's where the priorities are. And I think Brian and I agree that's not where they should be.
So let me take this back over to you, Brian, for a second, because one of the things, there's so much to unpack. You guys are right. We probably won't get to other topics today. The sales tax have a significantly greater impact on those that don't have. And I just quick cursory search shows that if you look at the state of Missouri, we're roughly 14% of the population, pushing 15%, live at or below the poverty line, which is a couple points higher than the national average. That's really not the number that scares me, though, because that's usually where people go. I think in terms of kind of, quote, normal middle-class households, with 2.2 kids, maybe a cat and a dog and everything else. So I kind of did some research. 86% of Missouri are households that make $100,000 or less. Okay, and we all know, right? We are those people. We're close to those people. Those are our family members, etc. We know that it's not easy. We know that right now things are expensive. There is definitively an affordability crisis, right? And my question to you, Brian, is it's kind of parlaying off of what Nick was alluding to towards the end of what his last point. When you look at the explosion of billionaires, when you look at the explosion of wealth, what we're really talking about, and I hate this term, K-shaped economy, right? It splits. There are the haves that continue to rocket north, and then there are the have-nots that the lower leg of this K shooting down into the right is getting longer and longer and longer. Do you view it that way? And are you afraid that elevating sales taxes on families, because most of these families at 100 grand or less, and we're talking about 86% of the state, by the time they're done doing their taxes, their effective tax rate, Missouri-wise, is very low. They are not paying a lot in taxes. But if we decide to make up the budget via sales taxes and service taxes, they have to buy milk. They have to buy gas. Are you afraid of that repercussion?
Yeah, no doubt, to be honest, just looking at it from a pragmatic standpoint. Look, my district is overwhelmingly under the median average, of household income. We are definitely under the poverty level on average income as well. So, my district specifically will be directly affected by this. And, we're in my district, I think we may have like one Walmart and a lot of mom and pop grocery stores where things are already 30% higher than they would be, at a Walmart. It already affects us heavily. And then if you add an additional 5 to 6% of sales tax on top of that, I think you're really going to see the lower income earners directly affected by this pretty heavily. So that's something that, I look at. Ultimately, at the end of the day, for me and my thought process on income tax is, the morality side of it. We are a government. Government has been put here by man as a necessary evil, if you will, to protect the rights of, but basically protect our rights. And at the end of the day, should a government be able to come in and take the property of an American, of a Missourian? Because ultimately, that's what your income is your property. You earned that, whether it's through your own means, whether you have your own business, whether you're working for someone else. Either way, that is your property. That is your money. And to me, I just don't think the government should, have the capabilities of coming in and taking that for whatever services. So if I could just finish real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of the conversation has been held around the economic side of it, or the eco-devo side of it. We're trying to bring businesses here. That's why the Republicans are doing this. And but then there's a small minority of us that just think that income tax itself is wrong. So we've really gotten ourselves into a pickle here, because the Republicans under 20 years of Republican leadership have increased spending, have gotten us into this predicament of where we're drunk on government spending, and we're going to have to find our way out of it if we want to do this.
So let me just ask a question then, because I think we all agree we have expenses. They're not going to go away. We probably underfund certain services, such as disability, such as education, even first responders to a degree. I'm not saying there's not room for efficiency or improvements, but as it stands, they are underfunded, just simplistically put. And if you, how do you, through your moral theoretical vision of how the relationship between government and its citizens as it applies to taxes, in your world, perfect world, how do these things get paid for if, in fact, at some point taxation is viewed as pure theft and outlawed? How do we operate?
So, I think ultimately, we are spending more than we ever have as a state. Last year, we passed the second largest budget in the history of Missouri. I actually thought it was the largest, but apparently we were second largest by like 0.2 million or something like that, or billion. So we constantly hear this, well, this service is underfunded, this service is underfunded. And I'm sure if I were a department head in that department, I would also claim that I was underfunded. At some point, it's going to have to stop and not be underfunded. Otherwise, we're just going to continue spending. I don't understand how we can have a budget that went from about $26 billion 6 years ago to now over $52 billion. And here we are looking like this year that it might be even larger than what we spent last year.
Well, isn't part of the simplistic answer, though, just inflation, service inflation, cost of goods, et cetera? And I get maybe there's accelerated wages, but let's just look at, healthcare premiums. Let's look at auto insurance, auto repair, right? All of these things add up. Those are the real costs to households. And to think that those costs aren't kind of passing through to the cost of government services, just it doesn't true up. So how do we, well, let me ask you just this. What would you prioritize? Spending, evaluating spending, or revenue? Because we all know that they go hand in hand, but we can't take a baby step in either direction because of the way we operate. What would you focus on?
Yeah, for me, it's spending. We have to live within our means. Ultimately, that's what we have to do. And there's a lot of trust that's put on here in our budget committee. Nick is an insider there. He has firsthand experience on how that works, even though we've only been here for a year and a couple months. But look, I can promise you, if you're not on budget, you have no clue how the budget works here. And yeah, I guarantee you. And that's exactly right. And so what happens is you have all 163 of us. There's maybe about 40 of us who, maybe not even that many, I don't know how many is on budget committee, that really know how the process works. The rest of us just trust the budget committee and just check yes and hope that it's all good. Now, I voted against the entire budget last year because to me, if you take the inflationary rates and and apply that to our spending over the past 6 years, we are so far beyond that inflationary rate of where we should be at. We should be around like 38 billion if that were the case. Our general revenue right now is at about 16 billion. It should be our spending on that should be much closer to, in regards to spending, that is, excuse me.
Sure.
We utilize all that 16 billion. It should be much closer to anywhere from 12 to 13. Just looking at the interest or the inflationary rates. So we're just vastly out of the boundaries of inflation that we've utilized a lot of federal funding to get ourselves into a bunch of these programs. But the problem is a lot of that federal funding was like one-time spending issues, appropriations for the federal government, but yet we have created them as temporary or long-term programs. So now we have to continue to fund those things. So we've just made some really poor decisions since COVID that I think that have really put us in this situation. And I don't have an end-all be-all answer, to be honest, but
Sure.
I do think that we need to hone in on spending.
Nick, I'm going to come over to your side of the fence here. Because historically the national narrative when it comes to Democrats and spending and budgets is that that's a joke, right? Everybody's going to be like, no, spend too much. Look at California, etc. And you are the super minority in Missouri, you being the Democrats. How are you personally approaching this debate as far as what can you even focus on? You don't have the votes, you don't have the numbers, just from a pure party perspective. You can slow things down, but at the end of the day, if there's coalescence on the right, you can't stop it, right? So what's your thought? What's your process? What are you focusing on, not only from a broad view for the state of Missouri, but maybe for your constituents directly? Connect the dots for me.
I don't know whose internet it is, but someone is cutting out.
There we go.
Yeah.
You guys good? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see Bryant and can't really.
I'm good on this side. Here we go. 30. Oh, everybody stalled out here. We'll just give it a second. There we go.
Yeah. Clearly, the overlords here in the House have seen us talking about spending.
So what we're saying is we've underfunded our house Wi-Fi.
Yeah. It's that broadband expansion.
I'm going to regroup here. I got a mark on here. Nick, I was just talking to you, asking you, as a Democrat in the super minority, connect the dots as far as how you're approaching this debate, this conversation, both pragmatically and what are you communicating to your own constituents? You're on mute, Nick. There we go.
It was great content we missed out on. No, no, I think Yeah, I think Bryant made a great libertarian argument, and I think this goes into, you know, why I'm not a Democrat. My caucus is, you know, or why I'm a Democrat. My caucus is there is um, all those, like, yes, taxation is inherently taking the money you earn and putting it towards whatever the government sees fit, whatever us elected see fit, whether it be federal, state, anything like that. But there's a social contract aspect to this. That, you know, there is a religious aspect, and I know, you know, Brian and I are both, you know, religious people with different faiths. Like, there's a religious aspect to the social contract, and there's just inherently something that we enter into as a society, and there's tons of aspects to that. But one of those things is, how do we um, lift up the least among us, and how do we make sure that everyone has a certain standard of living? We're obviously very lucky in America to have a really high standard of living compared to other places, but you know, there's always more to do. You know, you don't have to look too far to see where there's gaps to be made up. But I think that really comes to you know, one, like you said in the beginning, you know, Democrats, you know, tax and spend. The economy has done better under Democrats at a federal level than Republicans. Basically, in the past, like since World War II, like going back many, many decades, like any statistic you can look at, Democrats have expanded the economy, grown the economy. And I don't mean growing the budget, while that might have happened too, to be fair to Bryant, but like growing the economy, expanding the pie. And I think that's what we, you know, if we had a perfect plan and we ran this building, it's not about, oh, how do we keep these people permanently in this, you know, at this minimum wage job, or this class of folks. It's no, you know, how do we get you a better job? I don't mean the government, but how do we grow that? So that's
Let me push back on that just a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to show my fair, unbiased brain at work here. Means testing is a term that's used often in the corporate world, and statistics, environment, etc., to see what works. Right. The biggest knock on the Democrats when it comes to government budget spending is that there's a plethora of examples, a long list of, over time, of organizations or causes or spends that are feel good, sound good, but if you really dumb it down and you look at, okay, what is the effect, what is the ROI, it is either negligible or non-existent, right? And to Brian's point, and I agree, there, you know, the whole waste, fraud, and abuse narrative, I believe all three exist, and I think Democrats need to take some ownership of some of the spending, right? To battle for higher teacher pay, to battle for better roads, or whatever it is, you know, these things that we tangibly benefit from is one thing, but to use state funding or federal funding for pet projects to learn something that is not a greater good for all, but, you know, checks a box, that's bad spending in my opinion as well. What is, in your view, what is the Democrats' responsibility and role when it comes to accepting and owning a big chunk of the deficit that we have? And in spite of the fact that I agree with you, statistically, the economy does do better under Democratic administrations historically. So, own it. What do you got?
I mean, I have no pushback on your pushback. Like, I completely agree with that. That's why I'm a center-left pragmatic guy. I think, like, one, both sides do pet projects. Bryant does not do pet projects because he is a very principled person. But it's not just pet projects on the Democratic side, but there is waste, fraud, and abuse, and it is very frustrating to, whether it be folks on my side of the aisle, of like, well, this was meant to be good. Yes, waste, fraud, and abuse did come from that. Well, it's like, I agree it was meant to be good, but if we don't own the waste, fraud, and abuse and get that out as much as possible, then we have no credibility to say we should expand these programs or do other programs that might be good. You have to want the waste, fraud, and abuse, you know, it needs to be caught. It should be caught. We have examples because it was caught. There's always going to be bad actors, but you have to own that, and we have to make sure to, you know, tighten the belt, so to speak, to make sure that doesn't happen. Because it gives you no credibility moving forward. So I mean, I really have no disagreement to what you
So,
said.
okay, so Brian, let me come your way real quick here, because earlier in the conversation, Nick was talking about a period of time, specifically the growth and the thriving nature of the middle class. We all, historians, all agree that we could kind of pinpoint that from roughly the mid 1950s through the early mid 1960s, in which you saw an explosion of union participation. You saw the middle class really coming into its own. You saw home ownership skyrocket. You saw educational attainment go way up. You saw better healthcare outcomes. We saw the expansion of interstate system, and on and on and on and on. All these things. And if you looked at the government spending, yes, we were accumulating debt, but from a percentage standpoint, on a chart, it was a low, slow, up and to the right line that was manageable. Okay. And to Nick's, point, and I've thought about this, and I actually wrote about this once, when you fast forward to today, and the whole Make America Great Again mantra, the again portion of that statement alludes to a period in time previous, right? And Trump's populism was undoubtedly directed at the middle class or those that were struggling. And what happened during the time in which they did do well, which I argue is the again time frame that he was referencing, is that, and Nick pointed this out, we did have a higher corporate tax rate. We did have significantly higher. In fact, in the low 90s, high-end earners would hit that point when it came to the progressive income tax, right? And yet we still were producing millionaires by the day, and slowly, the wealthy were getting wealthier in an environment in which taxes were extremely high on paper and functionality, and businesses were growing, we were expanding, we were hiring, we were paying higher wages, all these things, and services were improving. So if you can fundamentally just agree with the historical reality of that time frame and the financial impetus, stimulus, I should say, that led to that during that time, how can we true that up today by going extreme the other way to try and fight towards a Texas scenario in which we're at zero and still expect to pay our bills and improve livelihoods?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think with your statement talking about Make America Great Again, I actually don't disagree with you. I've said that as well. I think, looking back towards the 50s and 60s, 70s era of this nation is probably what that's referring to. See, me, myself, when I think Make America Great Again, I'm thinking about getting us back into the late 1700s, early 1800s type of scenario. So, it's
I'm not surprised.
But I think one of the things that you can contribute to back in those eras is also the fact that we were so heavily deregulated in many of those, in many industries that helped produce a lot of these millionaires and business owners that were able to kind of jump and take advantage of the technology boom back then. And we've continued to have this technology boom. There's always going to be a technology boom. That is, it just depends on, are we going to allow those business owners, are we going to create a market, or as a government entity, I would hope that we, stay out of it to allow competition to flourish and allow these mom and pops who got ahead and were able to take advantage of the system. I think just being here for such a short time, you see a lot of these heavy corporations get involved in the lobbying process that gets them take advantage of kind of like, I don't want to necessarily call it cronyism, but I mean, I guess it kind of is, to where they're basically paying to regulate an industry. They are pushing a legislative item that they're trying to get. And I don't want to get away from the tax side of things, but like, I think that's one of the big issues that we see here that has caused kind of like regulatory mess and makes the barrier of entry for new businesses to get into new industries. And that's kind of like stopping that boom.
Wouldn't it make more sense? Because I agree with you. And I think the layman's term for what you're describing is bribes. So wouldn't it make more sense then if we all agree that regulations to the extreme, right? Limiting the NIMBY mindset when it comes to corporate America, when it comes to protecting one's backyard from a whatever the reason is, because again, this is probably California's biggest issue. By going NIMBY when it came to environment and all these other things, they created an issue where they can't build. They have a housing issue there because you can't get permits, right? So that's a whole other issue. And where I'm going with this in Missouri, if it's been proven, well, it's not definitively. Shouldn't the House have focused on regulation and rules and making things maybe more accessible, easier first to see what kind of revenue we could generate there than to cut off funding first?
I mean, I don't think that's a bad way to look at it, for sure. And I also wanted to make this point earlier, not to spin away from your point, but sure. I also would argue that spending back in the 50s, 60s, 70s were probably not as on unnecessary things like we do now. As I alluded to earlier, I hate to keep bringing this point up, but it's really relevant. But to the $40 million that we're going to get to the World Cup and things towards like tourism, I think we were much smarter with our spending on both parties back in the 1900s. What seemed like such a vast, it seemed like it was so long ago, but yet at the same time, it really wasn't. You know, you're talking less than a century. And to me, I just think we're a totally different beast at this point. It's so hard to compare apples to apples because I think you know, you got party shift as well. You know, we talk about. I would argue that the Republican Party grows government almost as fast as the Democratic Party at this point. And you know, I'm a very Goldwater guy, so like that's to me unfortunate. So we have came a long way as a party as well. And you can go back over the last 60 years, and I give this speech often about I start in like the 60s, and I talk about, you know, how Democrats, you know, have increased spending and increased government's role in society to this point. Then the Republicans take over, and then they just go to here, and then the Democrats take over. Like, anyways, I got away from your point. I apologize there, but I just wanted to.
Oh, that's okay.
We're just so drastically different than what we were 60 years ago that getting back to that point would be like a saving grace for me. I would love to get back to what government's involvement was back then.
Well,
can I jump in, JB?
Yeah, do your thing.
Okay. And not so much a pushback to Brian, but I think the crux of the issue, and I do think this takes us back to the original income tax situation, is the government did make investments, right? There was less regulation, and you know, I think some of that some of that's good. You know, you can see in cities now, it's not smog filled, you know, acid rain type thing, but some of that is not good. But government invested in some of these companies, McDonnell Douglas, the internet, like all these different capabilities during the space race and all these things, and made some of these companies, and we still do that now. There, you know, you have Missouri Technology Corporation, and you know, it's not direct investment, but it's and it's not picking winners and losers, but it's like, hey, this exists, so we can give you a little startup funding because this is a good idea, but you need private investment, you need a little government, you know, forgivable loan essentially to make those investments for you to turn into this giant job, high paying, high wage jobs creator. And we got these companies and we got these people to making, you know, millions, billions of dollars hand over fist. And then they're coming in, to bring it back to Brian's point, to lobby and say, hey, we'd really like to see a lower income tax rate or on our executives or our company. And so it's taking the public's money and then saying, hey, we actually don't want to pay back our fair share. Myself, and I think most of my party, I want to see people get rich as possible. I want to see people have high-weighing jobs. I don't want to make a permanent underclass. Like, we want high wages, be as rich as possible, become a millionaire, become a billionaire, but pay your fair share. Because at some point along the line, I think most people can say, hey, the government helped be a part of my success. And maybe government's not the right term, but like you went to a public school, or your county or someone gave you a forgivable loan to start your business, or some way along the line. And it's, again, going back to that social contract. So with the state income tax, there's different ways to have business investment, to have higher wages. We're just, not only are we doing it the wrong way, I think, that will cut services and not lead to those higher wage jobs, but we're not even doing it the way that Tennessee, Texas, and Florida have done it, because we are not cutting our spending, to Brian's point, and we're going to raise sales tax. So it's just a tax bait and switch, and personal property tax, lower in Missouri than a lot of places, but higher than a lot of people would like. Those states have extremely high personal property taxes.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that.
So JB, and I'm sorry, I know, but I also want to piggyback off that, because I think it's vitally important for Missourians to understand that we talk about picking winners and losers. We give so many tax exemptions and tax credits that only such a few large corporations can benefit from. That's the other side of things. Like, I directly have my county specifically is being hurt by a sales tax exemption for like the mining industry. And, it's costing us millions of dollars a year in essential services locally.
Yeah.
So like, we do that all the time here in Missouri because we're trying to micromanage things. But the reality is these lobbies are strong. So they'll come in and they'll lobby, they'll take advantage of, a new rep, or take advantage of leadership who's trying to raise money to get Republicans reelected, or on the Democrat side of things, trying to get Democrats reelected. And therefore they win the game because they pay more. So like, we have all these probably billions of dollars that we're leaving on the floor here because of tax credits and tax exemptions that we're giving that not everyday Missourians are able to take advantage of. It's crazy.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to wrap up this, and we're going to move to a quick midterm conversation. But what I want to leave on this, and you both nailed it. And I have always believed government spending is not a right or wrong thing. It's a moral litmus test. And what happens is, if it's coming, if the government is going and giving money to defense or big oil or big banks, well, then the right is going to say those are subsidies, that's economic stimulus, and the left is going to say that's a handout. And then then the left is going to say, or the right is going to say, if the money goes to healthcare or education or whatever, well, that's government handout. And the left's going to say, no, that's improving our lot in lives for more citizens. So at the end of the day, it's all spending, and it goes through this moral litmus test, and everybody wants to either choose whether or not it's a subsidy or if it's waste. And at some point, we've seen what happens. I'm going to go back to the K-shaped economy. The haves have more, and the have-nots have far less. And until we close that gap, I don't think it matters. And in Missouri, with the income tax, look, every math equation out there is saying the same thing. Those under 100 grand in particular are going to take it in the teeth if this thing goes through, because we do not have enough supplemental income or tourism or natural resources that can make up the difference. So sorry guys, I got the last word on that one. But now
your show.
I'll edit it out later. Brian, I asked for some topics so that we can wrap this thing up. Let's spend maybe 10-15 minutes and get you guys out of here and back on the floor and doing your day jobs. You had mentioned, well, why don't we talk about midterms? And in my head, I'm like, cool, I love that subject. Where do we start? Because there's a few things that seem to might be playing a role in the direction in which the midterms might go. But since you were the one that suggested the topic, floor is yours. Midterms 2026 coming down the pipe. Give us a pregame. This is NBA on TNT. You got a good 30-45 seconds here. What are we going to see come midterms in your opinion?
Well, if I would have known I was going to be the one punished for suggesting the idea, then I wouldn't have brought it up. No. So look, I think there's the realistic scenario that our party loses seats because there's nothing big on the ticket coming up. When I think statewide, we have the state auditor, and that's it. There's no presidential election, no governor election, no other statewides. And we are going to have for sure a resolution or a constitutional amendment that is going to be brought to the people that it goes after the amendment process or the abortion process again. Then you have another HJR that's going to be changing the initiative petition process, reforming that. So I think as Republicans, strategically speaking, I think we're going to have a tough time retaining 111 seats that we have. Granted, we thought that last time too, but yet we rode the coattails of the federal elections, and so we were able to keep the exact same seats. So I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but I think ultimately here in Missouri, it's do Republicans keep 111 seats or do we leave some?
Nick?
Yeah, I think there's two things that really Brian alluded to. You have an extremely engaged and passionate, intense Democratic base, both federally and at the state level. Federally, right, pushback to Trump, wanting to see a change and have some sort of check on the I will say abuse of power, but check on all three branches of government. In Missouri, I don't think that's even dissimilar, right? There was two amendments that were passed by the people that within months of them passing, we overturned up here at the state. So people are upset. People are mad. You have a high, super engaged Democratic base, and then a depressed Republican one, I think, is what you're going to see, because the one at the federal level, the Trump administration, reneging on a lot of the promises made to lower cost, not get involved in foreign engagements, a number of other, releasing the Epstein files, like a number of other things. And then going back to the statewide stuff, a lot of Republicans and independents voted for those initiatives, like those amendments too, and they were overturned. And what have we done up here in Missouri, like that actually benefits people's lives? Well, we're actually raising your sales taxes. So there's not a lot of give and takes. I do think Dems here in Missouri are going to get out of the super minority and win some of those swing seats. And I don't know what those are. There's some state Senate seat pickups.
Yeah,
in Springfield and KC, a lot of opportunity.
I always, when I think of Missouri in particular, when we go into a race like this at the state level, I can't help but think of Carville and it's the economy stupid, right? Because Missouri is feeling it. It is feeling the pinch from a number of these policies, from ACA reductions to just the economy in general, tariffs, the effect that it's having on some import businesses that are more just kind of surplus goods or commodity goods, etc. It's not easy out there. And we all know these people. They're your constituents. They're our neighbors. Nobody's stupid. People are struggling. So I guess the question to you, Brian, is you see it. I'm not saying anything you don't know. What's the message? Like, if you're going to go out there and try to put up a wall, be a little defensive, how do you counteract the reality that people are feeling at the kitchen table? Oh, are you there? Brian, can you hear me?
No, I'm losing connection here. I can hear you now.
Yeah, we're good now.
Yeah,
there we go.
Can you reframe that question or can you give that question one more time?
Yeah. So what I was saying is that the kitchen table reality of America is in front of everybody's face. We all know that expenses are higher. Core expenses, the big ones. Even though gas dropped a little bit, the reality is our healthcare has gone up. A lot of our mortgage expenses, insurance, etc. It's not making up the difference. So my question to you is, if you're going to put up a little bit of a defense of a wall to try and counter the reality that people are feeling at the table, what is that pitch in order to try and attempt to maintain the 111 seats whenever these people are feeling and saying the exact same thing that they were saying in 2024 whenever the Biden-Harris campaign said, no, the economy is just fine?
Well, I'm going to be real honest. I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person to pitch that counter argument, because I've been just as disappointed with things as most. I don't think we're doing enough Republican things, small government things, dereg things. Believe it or not, 80% of the bills that we passed and sent to the governor's desk last year were supported by a majority of Democrats. So I don't know how conservative we are when that's the type of legislation we're passing. No offense, Nick. So
that was, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I think, admittedly, I don't know if necessarily like my extreme conservative views align with the majority of Missourians. So I'm not in leadership. I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe they're trying to concede and try to win these votes at the end of the day. But I think you're right. We're demoralizing our base because, we're not seeing and doing the things that they expect from us, and we're conceding too often with the other side. So like you could take like the resolution, the amendment that's trying to overturn the previous Amendment 3, the abortion language, if you will. Well, there was concessions made there in that language that has now split the Republican grassroots base. So now we have, in order for like the vote on that was really close. It was like 52 or maybe it's like 51% to 49 or something on the previous Amendment 3. Well, this new Amendment 3 that is trying to overturn that language is now going to have this huge split in the Republican Party because you've lost the grassroots with having exceptions and stuff in there. So it's going to be tough. I don't really have this like one liner that says, hey, keep us in, we're going to keep doing great things.
Do you think Republicans in Missouri continue to burn up political capital, for example, on the Amendment 3 issue, the abortion issue itself? The people have spoke, and when you straw poll, the majority of people in the state of Missouri will continue to lean in the direction of pro-choice. They want liberty, freedom. Do it. It's your body. Fundamentally, that's what they're looking at. Now, I don't want to get in the weeds on that, but when we have a state that has economic issues that we've been talking about for the last hour, and we have national narratives that continue to point to no real end in sight for those kitchen table issues, at some point, do you think that the party in Missouri should move away from certain subject matter that it's not winning, and there's a greater call to action that's occurring when people pull out their checkbooks? Where are you on that?
Man, this house Wi-Fi is killing us.
I'm starting to feel like this is a Fox News interview where I'm not getting the. Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up.
I can hear you. Can't see you.
Oh, geez. Oh, we lost it. Nick, you there?
I am here, I think.
Yeah, I can see and hear you. Brian just dropped out. He's going to bounce back in. Damn. I'm just going to throw one more question out to both of you guys and get you moving, all right?
Okay, cool, man.
Come on, Brian. There we go.
Man, I don't envy you in post.
Right? Gee, you guys are crushing me here.
Well, it's because we spent all that extra money in broadband expansion and instead of relying on the free market. So
okay,
yes.
looks like Nick's trying to jump back in here.
Yeah, well, I'll have to answer pretty quick, and then I got a 9:45 here, getting ready to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Pop in here.
I'm gonna kill that last question. I'm gonna edit
Okay.
up. I'm just gonna give you guys a softball question, nationally speaking.
Okay.
All right. I tell you what, I'm just gonna go with you, and then if he jumps in, he jumps in. I'll add him after. Post. Okay. That's what post is for.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Brian. Hey, before I let you go, I want to get. There we go. There's Nick back. Brian, before I let you go, I want to get. I just want to zoom out a little bit. I want to expand on the conversation we are currently having regarding midterms. Given that was your subject that you brought up, Washington D.C. has a ton of midterms seats coming down the pipe here. Go ahead, since we are now a sports gambling legal state. And Kalshi accessible. Give me your over under. What are you thinking?
To be real honest, I think nationally, I don't see a whole lot of change. I know we see this every election cycle, that the other side just brings up all these issues to where the Republicans are doing so bad, and of course when the Republicans are in the minority, the Democrats are doing so bad. I think overall, a majority of folks who supported Republicans in the previous election, I don't think are going to be super disappointed of where we're at right now. I do think there's going to be some subset of Republicans that are disappointed in this war. I think if anything, that could cause a ripple effect down the line. But from what I'm seeing in my little echo chamber, I don't know if you're going to see much of a turn, to be honest. I think we for sure will keep the Senate. And just looking at those numbers, and I think the House is going to be close, but I think we're going to be fine.
Nick, I have a feeling that you have a much different opinion based on your inner bubble. Give me your 101 on what you think is going to happen come November midterms nationally.
Yeah, I think Brian and I are on the opposite side of this one. I think the federal election, the wave is going to be bigger than here in Missouri, actually. The House for sure gone. I think it's going to be 20, 30 seats. Like I said, high Democratic engagement. Brian's closer to the Republican base than I am, so maybe I'm wish casting, but I think there's a lot of disappointment to be had with the Trump administration for his stated goals. I think the Senate's in play now. You're seeing it in special election after special election, Democrats flipping not just 2-3 points, but 10+ point seats in swing states, in red states, getting out of the super minorities, rebalancing. People want a check on this administration, and I think you're going to see that, from independents, some Republicans staying home, and a very engaged Democratic base.
Yeah, I am going to pick sides on this last one. I agree with you, Nick, and I think it's more because of I don't want that than it is the Democrats making a compelling argument. I think we are entering into an election in which it's the chaos is undeniable. And I think the promises that were made are clearly not being kept. And I think the American public's not stupid. They are not being motivated by the blue team, so to speak. I think that they are just hitting the wall with MAGA in particular. So it'll be really interesting. Gentlemen, you guys got to go and work for my tax dollars. I'm sick of people not working for me when I spend this kind of money, so Brian Wolfen from down south, Nick Kimball from here on the south side of the city. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, JB. Appreciate the time. And Nick, appreciate the conversation, buddy.
Yeah, you too, brother. I'll see you in 10 minutes here. We're sitting pretty close to each other, so we can recap.
Exactly.
All right, boys.
See y'all.
Hold on, boys. There we go. We are off the air. Gentlemen, that was good. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed it.